I'm still in death, I'm still in that cycle of death into rebirth, white into black, into white into black. It's like, that's my life right now. And I don't get to decide when that's over. My name is Diana. My pronouns are she and her.
And my name is Erica. My pronouns are also she and her. We are the co-hosts of the Sacred Pathways. Join us as we venture on shadowy paths towards acceptance, gratitude, and celebration of experiences that lead us forward in our search for self.
This feels like the appropriate time to just speak a tiny bit for me about my idea of this podcast, like the image that I hold inside of my mind of what this podcast is. Because I realized, like, thanks to your help the other day, your input and your bringing that up, that I was letting my idea get polluted. Maybe polluted is too strong a word, like kind of skewed to the side of what I really want it to be, by some of my old feelings about like wanting or even kind of needing attention. And there's a part of me that is so kind of desperate to feel useful and to feel like seen and important and like powerful and effective. And like, I'm so aware that that's like my tendency is to like grab for those things and to engage in like manipulation and lying and like all this bad behavior in the service of like wanting to be seen and wanting to be like powerful. And I really don't want this podcast to turn into a power grab kind of thing, or like something that I'm doing just to gain attention or just to like, I really want this to be about exploring the space that we're creating here. And I really want to center it for me on telling the truth and being in the moment and like, having an outlet for some poetry, having a chance to tell some stories, having a chance to spend time together and like, screw the outcome, like screw the the popularity contest. I feel like we're so prone to, doing things for attention, especially like with the influence of social media in a way, or just how we've reacted to social media.
Yeah.
Like whenever I go to Instagram, all I think about is how I look, and like, or something like just like that. It's like, I don't want to turn into the Instagram version of myself. And this like, I want this podcast to be about, real life and real me and just be seen as a three-dimensional human and not be performing myself to you or to our imaginary listeners.
Yeah.
So, and since we had talked about the theme of this being death, I want to bring death to that stressful idea of this podcast. Death to the stressful podcast.
Death. That's really beautiful that you brought that up, because in a way I was going through the same thing. And that's what made me hesitate. So for whoever is listening, we did our launch last week. We did our launch last week of our first podcast episode. We turned it in to Spotify, got approved. We turned it into Apple Podcasts, it got approved. And that was my oh shit moment where I was like, this feels legit. And what it felt like before was just like this fun, beautiful thing. And I was starting to have stress about all these actions and steps I had to take to make it follow the legitness I felt, if that makes sense.
Totally.
So in a way, I was going through the same thing, but it caused me to freeze. And I haven't been sharing about it. I haven't said anything. Mm-hmm. I haven't even accepted the tags on Facebook because I was just like, do I want people to know that I'm doing this yet? I feel like this podcast is more me than any post or Instagram story I've ever done. And I feel so vulnerable in this moment. And the stress is just making me freeze. So, death to that stress, because that's not necessary. We can make this our own, and we're making this our own. It's beautiful already. Special about this podcast is the different energy that we're bringing in, the safe space that we're bringing in for each other. And what I want most for people to get out of this is that they can feel safe to be themselves too.
I couldn't have said it better, and I'm so right there with you. That, yeah, this is us being ourselves and doing our best to tell the truth. And like, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's, you know, it feels very vulnerable. Like, I just want to appreciate what you said about feeling vulnerable and like welcome that vulnerability in this space. Um, it's something that I feel like we should lean into more often, like that's what's going to make us strong enough to meet this moment that really is pretty dark and tough. Like, I don't think we should sugarcoat, like, we're recording this on election day 2020, and it's like the whole world is holding its breath. Like, that's my feeling, is like, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? And we're both people whose like rights are kind of on the line in this election in some way, like maybe not as directly because we're both in California. And so thankfully we have a bit of a buffer, but like, anyway, we don't have to talk politics here. Let's not.
Now,
but that's just
death to politics.
That's some politics indeed. But that, I'm just painting the picture of like, that's the climate, like that's what's in the world right now, whether we like it or not. So I actually had a question for you. I listened to this other podcast. I'm really into podcasts, actually. And it was an interview with a thought leader kind of person and philosopher who really has done a lot of deep diving into indigenous thought and like paradigm thinking, and just like a lot of things that I'm really excited about. And one of the things that he just mentioned at the very end was that we need to learn how to die well. That's like one of the things that Western culture, quote unquote, doesn't really acknowledge. And it just made me think, like, what does that mean? And I don't think that we need to necessarily go and find that answer, but I wanted to ask you if you had, like, what comes up for you when you hear, learning to die well? Like, what do you think that means?
Yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of my half brother's passing. And this coming Sunday, is going to be the 2nd anniversary of losing my home and some of my hometown as I have known it. And next week is going to be the 2nd anniversary of my father's passing as well. So this time of year is very in sync with the seasons. Like, the leaves are falling and there is death happening as nature kind of renews itself. And this is also a time where I've had like major loss in my life in such short succession. It's really easy to talk about all the negative things that death brings, like mourning and sorrow and hardship for some people, but death death through my half brother's passing and my father's passing, and even my hometown, it brought an interesting way of opening up my heart to find forgiveness, which is a death of ego in some ways, because I switched from the victimhood mentality of like all these terrible things my dad has done and like the terrible things he's said to me, and then growing up in my hometown that's so conservative and racist, if I may say. Well, it has a history of being racist, and watching my mom, who is from Thailand, watching her get treated differently from people who are like in line in the supermarket, or like my classmates snickering at her accent. Like all of these memories still stick with me, and there has been so much anger towards my father in my hometown and my half brother too. He did a lot of things in his life that I didn't quite understand, and it all looked like attacks on me in some way.
Mm.
So yeah, I switched from this victimhood mentality, and it made me reflect on relationships and anger that I have towards the people who are still living. Because after the mourning period, which was really hard, it was also really confusing. It's mourning is so different for everybody. It's so different. I just shut down. Yeah, I shut down, and then it just like pours out of me in the middle of times that I don't expect them to. There have been things that happened to me after the fact of the huge loss of all three of them, that made me realize that I was so loved and so lucky. If I take away all the negative, well, actually, I don't even want to take away all the negative experiences, because everything's led me to where I am right now. But when I tie all of that together and like realize how much I really meant to my dad and how much my brother actually loved me, and how like what a beautiful community I had in Paradise.
Mm.
It's I had to also kill parts of myself that reacted to all those experiences that I took to heart and saw as attacks on myself. And when you're asking, what was the phrase again? Could you remind me, please?
Like, what does it mean to die well?
I think that stepping into a place of forgiveness and remaining humble, that's one of the really important ways that we die well.
Mm.
As your heart opens up, and there's been so much self death, death of my old self, in the death of what my professional dream was, and the death of my priorities, and the death of old cycles, and the death of toxic people in my life. It's a very, very unstable and very scary place to be in. I feel it's okay. This is the image that's coming to me. I feel super exposed here, and I'm not used to being exposed. But if I really think about it, all those deaths have formed a solid foundation under me.
Wow.
So, to answer your question, I think forgiving and forgiveness is dying well.
Oh my gosh. I love that. That really like opened my heart a little bit just hearing you say that. It was so interesting for me to listen to what you were saying because I kept hearing words that I've used for certain things, but in different ways. So it's like, wow, we're kind of like moving through some of the same topics or same experiences, but in really different ways. I feel like, like one of the things that we have in common, and which relates to how we met, is our profession, right? That we were both trained as opera singers at UCLA, and like I have really stepped away from that professional path almost completely. Like I don't plan on pursuing opera in the future at this moment. I'm opening, room for a change if I want to revisit that. But um, I've basically seen my professional life die as well, and my professional aspirations die. Like I've had a lot of dreams that have died. um, and I think that my laughing about this is actually like part of the detachment that I feel. Like I feel sort of like it's easy to talk about death, partially because I feel like it's all around me right now. Like I feel so in death. Not that I feel dead exactly, but like I'm in this huge process of metamorphosis. I'm in
Oh,
transition. My gender is in transition. Like my body is in transition. All of my like life kind of is just like one big death at this point. And so it's like I feel like I have to laugh, or I have to have this feeling of lightness around that, because otherwise I would just not be able to do what I'm doing and get up every day, and be in my parents' garage, which, they're really kind to let me stay here, but it's like not my ideal um, living situation. I love you, Mom, if you're listening. um, I don't want that to keep me away from feeling the impact of those deaths. And that's something, I connected to what you're saying about shutting down around mourning, around grieving, and then having it kind of come out in odd ways. I think for me, it's like the timing has just been unpredictable. Like if I'm by myself and I'm like, okay, this would be a okay time to cry. I don't
oh my
always
goodness.
feel like doing that, or I can't always do it, and
Yep.
um but then like I'll be talking about something unrelated to my grief, and then it'll be there, and that's something that I actually just want to honor. Like I don't really think that it's a problem. I'm okay with it changing, but I'm also okay with how it is, that my grief just comes up whenever it wants to, and it stays pretty much as long as it wants to. My job is just to encounter it, when it comes and how it comes. And if I can call in, love and acceptance and um, safety for myself, then I do. And yeah. A lot of the death that I've experienced, almost all of it really, has been kind of related to myself or parts of myself. And it's so funny because I kind of feel like I identify more strongly with the parts of me that have now basically died. Like there is so much of me that identifies myself as a person who no longer exists. um, like a male person or just a person who acts like this, or a person who is in that job, or a person who is in a relationship with that person. It's like, I got out of a long relationship about 3 months ago. I don't have a job, and that really points out to me too how much I've let myself be defined by my work and by my relationships and by other people. And that's like what I feel like is the beauty of this moment for me, is that I have the chance to recenter myself on defining myself like from the inside. And, I loved that you said, you know, that you just spoke what was important about this podcast. Like, I love that you just took that power and said, this is what's important, and not sort of, you know, oh, like, this is what I think, but like not being coy about it or not splitting hairs, but like that's what's important. And I want to speak that too for myself. What's important about this podcast is like, is authenticity, that we're real, that we're giving our hearts to this and not playing a game where we're trying to appear to be cooler than we really are. We're like two people that are in this experience together, and we're exactly how we are. And we're also changing every single moment, like we're just
Mm-hmm.
always changing no matter what. I had a really interesting encounter with my own art making the other day. Um, Let me see if I can spin this out. I wrote a song when I was about 19 called "The Chase," and it's like a very kind of sad, wistful song about being in pursuit of this person who may or may not be real. Kind of, it's about chasing an ideal, kind of. I feel like, or that was what I thought at the time. It was like, oh, I'm chasing this ideal. Maybe I'm chasing a romantic interest, or like it could be this sort of vision of beauty and success, like whatever it is. It's like this other thing personified. But one of the things that I know intuitively about my songwriting is that it's actually the one place where I haven't been able to actually lie. Like there's this really complicated, I feel like songwriters and people who are creative know that there's this really nuanced and interesting relationship between the person who is writing and the truth, or the material that
Mm-hmm.
you make, and whether it is true in a literal sense or it's true in a poetic sense. And, I feel like the best like fiction authors are people who can tell things that are not true, that have poetic truth in them, that have sort of mythological truth in them. And yeah, what's so interesting to me is that that's always been super important to me. Poetic truth has always been important to me, and it's actually something that I really haven't been able to write songs without. It's needed to be there from like the the beginning of my songwriting. And I went through most of my life feeling like I haven't been able to tell the truth, not because I didn't want to, but because I was being prevented somehow. So it's really
Yeah.
special to me to realize that there was at least one avenue in which I was telling a kind of truth. And So that song recently sprang to mind. Um, and I had this other perspective on it where, I do believe that poetic truth is real, that I felt in pursuit, that I felt like I was hunting something or sort of chasing after something. But what I think now, and this rings true in my heart, is that I was chasing after me. Like, that the character that I thought was a romantic interest or like beauty, like whatever it is, that was a part of me that I felt so disconnected from, that I didn't actually acknowledge was real. So now, like, I'm so glad that I don't have to chase myself in that way. And I can acknowledge that part of myself as being here. So it just feels like a really important poetic part of my history, really, is like, maybe the chase is over. Maybe I've caught myself now, like, but in that process, that part of me that was doing the chasing is now dead. I wrote a poem about it. Let me find this one. It's so interesting. I don't usually edit my poems, but maybe it's the influence of this podcast or the other processes that are taking place in my life, but I actually have edited this one.
Oh my goodness.
The last thing that I want to say to contextualize this is just that I use the color associations that I learned from the pagan Wicca tradition, that actually the color of death is white, like bones, like things that are dead. So death
Mhm.
is white, and black is the womb, is rebirth and fertility and the unknown. Those are the two colors that feature in this poem. It's called White Black. White Black. White as death, black as the womb. You ran until you fell, sweet one. White as death, black as the womb. The strength of your longing takes my breath away even now. White as death, black as the womb. You lived a life. You sang me into being. White is death. You chased a phantom, a half dream, thought she was a lover. Black is womb. When you caught her, you saw me, white bone death, turned, my face full of love, put you in the black earth womb. White was the floating dread in your body. Black was the falling, the releasing, the weeping. Black is the womb. Black is sinking, singing into the unknown, the unknowing. Black is hold me, dark void mother, for I cannot carry myself. Black, black, born into white death, over, over, black, black, black.
There were so many layers in that. I don't think even if you brought this into like a lit class or anything, people would be able to uncover all the layers, even with your beautiful introduction. You have both captured the essence of the song that you wrote when you were 19 and what existence is. Like, that's just truth. I think that is the truest truth, is that death exists, but also birth exists.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's why I love putting those two colors together and those two kind of symbols, is that, you know, in our culture, I think we think of birth and death as being opposite or being different. And I don't really think that's true exactly. I mean, physically, there's a difference, but energetically, I feel like it's more similar than different. Let's put it that
Yes.
way.
Yes.
The book that I've been reading, I recommend to you, about aspecting, and one of the best things that I've been reading recently actually was the section on Ereshkigal. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. Ereshkigal, who is the Sumerian goddess of death, of the underworld. The myth of her is very powerful. The symbol that she embodies is very powerful, but also, like, I'm learning so much from the way that this author Jane Meredith works with those energies. Like, she is so brilliant at dancing with the kind of energies that are created in her from learning about the goddess, from like
Mm.
experiencing her in her symbols, in her like story. That's empowering about that process, because as she points out in several, places in the book, it's about you as an individual, and not sort of the universe in a bigger kind of depersonalized way, and locating these bigger cycles within our own beings. And I feel like that's something that I've needed somehow. Like, that's the weirdest part about this experience of, coming out as trans in my 20s, is that I've needed these kind of skills and things to deal with my own experience, that then other people, I feel like, have trouble connecting to, or say, or
Mm.
they feel surprised by my connection to them, but I'm like, this is just my life. Like, I see myself as dead, or like I've gone through this death so recently that, and I still, like, I want to make sure that I speak this part. I'm still in death. I'm still in that cycle of death into rebirth, white into black, into white into black. It's like, that's my life right now, and I don't get to decide when that's over. I've been trying to speak it as if it was past tense because it's uncomfortable, I feel like, for
Right.
others to hear, but that's their discomfort to feel. you
Yeah.
know it's like you were saying in the previous podcast, that you don't want to take away those uncomfortable experiences from people. That is so generous, and in my opinion, I just want to like repeat that and say it for myself, because that is something that I need to learn, is that, you know if I make people uncomfortable, then maybe that's what they needed,
Yes.
and maybe I'm not wrong for making them feel that way, and I don't need to prevent myself from making them feel that way. That's, some of the things that have come up for me, is that I feel guilty when people are uncomfortable about who I am. But since my very existence as a trans woman makes some people uncomfortable, I've had to, over and over and over again, come to know that their reaction was not my responsibility.
Yes.
And it's still a lesson I'm learning. Like, it's taking me a long time. But I'm so glad that I'm learning it.
Me too. Of course, I do not see the entirety of this, but looking at your journey through an kind of aerial view, what a blessing. What a blessing it's been for you,
Yeah,
and is and will continue to be.
right. It's like, I don't recommend it, but it is a blessing.
Oh, oh.
But that's, I mean, God, what a perfect, um I guess, lens into death, is like, yeah, it's a Death is a gift that is really, really, really hard to accept, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe that's really offensive. I don't know. You know, like
If it is, that's on them.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, I like that. Okay, this one is also edited, and I'm not sure if it's done yet, but I'm gonna try it anyway. And I feel like it speaks for itself. When words are not enough, come to me with poetry. Spell me your life in leaves, in moonrises. Sing. When words are not enough, crack them open like nuts. Show me the meat you found. In hiding. Chew. When words are not enough, and they feel like the bars of a cage, look to where they begin. In essence, feel. Words are not enough. They can't contain the real. The path leading to the truth in life, you.
I love that. Words are,
Thanks.
yeah, yeah, does speak for itself.
It's so I find it so ironic to, in a certain way, to write poems like that, because it's pointing at the shortcomings that it has in itself. You know,
Yeah.
it's like a paper boat. It's something that's supposed to make itself irrelevant in a certain way, but that's kind of all we can do, really, is like
Oh my
point at the
God,
truth.
that's the whole point. That's the whole point. That is death to ego.
I love that. I love that.
Diana is going to now lead us into a closing prayer.
Connecting to our bodies, feeling our physical presence in the world. There's no arguing with it. There's no perfect definition, no words that we can wrap fully around your existence in this moment, in this body. And holding the knowledge that life and death are already with us and are with us in every moment. That fear can be here, discomfort can be here, and love can be here. And knowing that those feelings have boundaries, have definition, have texture, and that they're not forever. And we say thank you for the gifts that death brings and the gifts that life brings. We say thank you to the paper boats of our egos for passing us along to the next thing and then passing away. And we say thank you to humor and laughter and lightness. And thank you for being with us here. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
To our listeners, may you have many blessings and beautiful dreams. As we close, we ask you to consider sharing this episode with someone you care about, and/or invite them to have a conversation about these topics with you.
This episode was produced and recorded by Diana Walker and Erica Neufeld and edited by Erica Neufeld. The music in this episode was written, produced, and performed by Diana Walker and Erica Neufeld.